And welcome back to the special self-defense or murder, the George Zimmerman trial. The prosecution rested today. The defense began late this afternoon in Sanford, Florida, by calling the mother and the uncle of George Zimmerman. With me now for an exclusive interview is Mark O'Mara, Zimmerman's defense attorney. Mr. O'Mara, nice to see you, sir. Big last couple of weeks for you. I'm doing well. Big last couple of weeks for you. Huge day for you all as you first just want to begin fair and square. I just spoke with a co-counsel for the Martin family, and I want to begin similarly talking about these two mothers. Mr. O'Mara, first we see Sabrina Fulton this morning, and then the mother that you bring on opening up this afternoon, the mother of George Zimmerman. And let me just play both of these women, both testifying about one voice, a scream on a 911 call.
Ma'am, that screaming or yelling, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And who do you recognize that to be, ma'am?
Trayvon Benjamin Martin.
Do you know whose voice that was screaming in the background?
Yes, sir.
And whose voice was that?
My son, George.
And are you certain of that?
Because he's my son.
On the same day, Mark O'Mara, do you think that the testimony of both of these women cancel each other out, negate one another?
Well, I think the jury is going to realize that both these women have gone through tragedies. Ms. Fulton lost her son. Ms. Zimmerman has sort of lost her son, at least temporarily, having to live in hiding for a year and facing a life imprisonment sentence based upon the state trying to convict him of something. But I think the jury's just going to look at this and say, both of those women just have to live with the belief that it is, in fact, their son. And they're going to have to make a determination, not based upon what each mom says, but on the other evidence, sort of the forensic evidence.
6 female jurors, 5 of whom are mothers, I'm sure, sitting and listening very closely to both testimonies today. Strategy-wise, let's talk about your witness list. Here you have, you bring out George Zimmerman's mother and then the uncle. Why open with these 2 key family members?
Well, because I think the issue of whose voice it is screaming for help is significant with the jury. Quite honestly, once the jury decides, if they can, who is screaming for help, I think everything else falls in line. My hope is that they're going to look not only at what each mom says, but what other people say, what Tracy Martin meant when he said it wasn't his son's voice screaming for help. Even when Javaris talks and says that he thinks it might have been his brother, but it wasn't sure. But much more importantly, we have to look at the other evidence, the injuries to George, the forensics that support the fact that George was the one attacked, the fact that Trayvon Martin had no injuries but for the gunshot wound. I think that they're going to take it all sort of holistically or in context, and we'll be able to realize that it was, in fact, George screaming for help.
Back to Sabrina Fulton, Mark, this morning, and the way in which you cross-examined her. I talked to multiple lawyers today, and in describing the way in which you proceeded, they called it a rookie mistake. They never would have gone there. The length, the questioning. Let's roll some of it.
You certainly hope, as a mom, you certainly hope that your son, Trayvon Martin, would not have done anything that would have led to his own death, correct?
What I hope for is that this would have never happened and he would still be here.
Absolutely.
That's my hope.
Absolutely. And now dealing with the reality that he's no longer here, it is certainly your hope as a mom, hold out hope as long as you can, that Trayvon Martin was in no way responsible for his own death, correct?
I don't believe he was.
I know. And that's the hope that you continue, correct?
I don't understand what you're trying to ask me.
Okay. And again, I don't mean to put you through more than we need to. No other questions, Sean.
Why did you do that?
Because it needed to be said, it needed to be asked. Obviously, the reality is that each of those moms live with the hope that that's their son screaming. There's no way that I would represent George Zimmerman and not question Miss Fulton about the reality that it may well have been her son who did cause his own death, and therefore that it was George screaming for help. It's difficult, it's sensitive. I would challenge anyone who says that was a rookie mistake, because I think it's the way it needs to be done, having done it in probably 40 other murder trials. And it's just something that you have to get out, because after all, that jury has to make a decision what credibility to give each witness, and we are charged with the responsibility of bringing out those sort of biases that exist, those emotionalisms that are out there that we have to brute forth to the jury, and that's what I thought I did.
But Mark, you point out your own words. Here we have these two grieving mothers grieving in their own way, and watching, your witness, George Zimmerman's mother, on the stand. De La Rionda asked one question on cross and was finished. I mean, what did you gain by question after question after question of Trayvon Martin's mother?
Well, the few questions I asked her was to deal with the reality of what she was going through and how that might impact on her ability to hear what she says she heard. I believe that she believes that it was Trayvon Martin's voice, because that is exactly what she wants to believe. But the reality is you have to take it all in context, and all of the other evidence would suggest it wasn't. That's what I had to bring across in that questioning.
I want to call attention to your client, to George Zimmerman's demeanor today. This is the first time, Mark, that we have seen him appearing to wipe away tears, swallowing hard. This was late this afternoon during the testimony of his mother. And I noticed in particular with that of his uncle, when it was his uncle saying, unequivocally, it was the voice of George Zimmerman on that 911 call. How is George Zimmerman? How is he holding up through this?
Well, this is a very, very difficult time for him. He is being prosecuted by a state attorney's office that wants to put him away for the rest of his life for doing what he believed he had to do to protect his own life. And while you can steel yourself pretty well against the emotions that are happening in a courtroom, I think it's much more difficult to do so when you hear your own family members speak. And I think that what happened was, while George has been intentionally sort of non-emotional through the presentation of the state's case, when it's his mom up there talking, when it's the uncle he grew up with up there talking, I think that just hits you in the heart. Very, very difficult to deal with. And I think it showed with his tears.
Got to ask the question everyone's asking of you, Mark, and that is, will he testify? When do you make that determination?
We're looking to make that determination sometime next week, because I think most of our case will be going on then. As I've said from the beginning, that decision is never made until I convince myself that the state has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt, such that we would need to put any evidence on, and certainly the evidence of George's own testimony. If he did not have all of his statements out, if he truly had to get in front of that jury to first word, I'd probably say he's definitely going to testify. Now, since he has so much information out there from all of his statements, we'll make that decision in more of a dynamic fashion once we see how else the rest of the case goes.
Mark O'Mara with us tonight. Mark, thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. Big week ahead, sir. Appreciate it.
Brooke. Yeah, I'll be working. All right, take care.
I'm sure you will. And as you just heard, both the mothers of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, take the stand today. The question, though, is it's about the jury, and who did the jury believe? We'll have a closer look at this riveting testimony next.